Welcome, advocates, to another regional interview with the Minnesota Coalition for the Homeless. Today, I have Commissioner Angela Conley from Hennepin County District 4 with us to talk about homelessness in her community. Welcome, Commissioner Conley.
Thank you so much for having me. This is great.
Yeah, so I'm just going to jump right into a few questions here. And the first one is, how does homelessness impact you and your community?
Mm. So I represent an area on the county board that really gets hard. I represent an area in Hennepin County that gets hit so hard with unsheltered homelessness. We are seeing some of the largest encampments that we have seen in years in the state, right in our own backyards here in the district that I represent. Many of the encampments of 2020 and years before have been right outside of my front door, from Hiawatha to Powderhorn Park to some other areas along the Midtown Greenway, which is also in District 4. And so our community really is saying that there is a dire need for expansion of capacity to shelter people. And there's a dire need to really look at what our shelter model is built from and expand from there. So thinking about different ways that shelter should exist. And so our community is really, we really um, came together last year, I think, around supporting our neighbors who were experiencing unsheltered homelessness or who were unhoused. And it really was a push to say that, we want to take care of each other and that we believe housing is a fundamental basic human right and no one should have to sleep outside in a place that's unfit for human habitation or a place that is not dignified housing. And so for our community, we've just been hit really hard with the realization that more investment is in, like, a critical need into shelter capacity, into deeply affordable housing investments for people who are coming out of long-term and chronic homelessness.
Yeah, one of the things we've been talking about and how we've been framing the issue this legislative session is that shelter saves lives, housing ends homelessness.
Mm,
And I think what you just touched on was exactly that. We need shelter to bring people inside. We also need a long-term solution because shelter isn't a long-term solution, but it is a life-saving solution.
mhm.
And so you're so passionate about this issue. Why? Why are you so passionate? Not only are of course you're an elected official, so it's your job, but
Mhm.
you come with this issue with a lot of passion.
I do, and I also wanna add that housing is also healthcare. Like, it really is the root of the health and well-being of us as people, as human beings, living in Hennepin County, living across the state. It's a need for all of us, right? And it really, housing really meets all of the things that we say we want to improve upon. My passion comes from lived experience. Years ago, I knew what it was like to have to pick up 2 babies and leave where I was living and not know where I was going. And so that type of housing insecurity really scares you and really changes your view. I would say I was a half of a footstep away from entering shelter or thinking about, am I going to have to sleep in my car? Or am I going to have to go to a shelter? How do I find shelter? Is there room? So my passion comes from lived experience and understanding that no one should be faced with that. And we have to have support systems. So for me, housing certainly exists on a spectrum. There's one end where we're talking about emergency, getting people off the street, not meant to be long term, but support and stabilize. And then we move along a continuum towards eventually permanent, stable housing that people can really afford. So that's my passion. And I agree that this is a spectrum that we're talking about, and we need major investments at each step of along that spectrum.
Thank you for sharing that, Commissioner. And one thing you touched on that I want to dig a little deeper into. I know we don't have a lot of time today, but you talked about
That's
different
right.
shelter models, and I know you're part of the shelter design team. Can you tell me a little bit about what
Mhm.
you see as those investments that are so critically necessary to make shelter
Mhm.
accessible and responsive to people in the community?
Absolutely. So I wasn't a part of the design team, but I was part of this big unsheltered homelessness roundtable with a lot of elected officials. And so as part of that, we were being informed on what needs there are and how shelters should change. And the design team presented to us and said, hey, we need shelters that are culturally specific, that represent, that have supportive services that are culturally relevant, specifically because there are the largest numbers of people experiencing unsheltered homelessness are Black and Indigenous folks. And so, how do we tailor services within shelter to be culturally specific? And people's possessions are important too. So people who are living outside have had their belongings thrown away or stolen. So we want to make sure that we invest in lockers and and uh, and places to store and storage for people to store their belongings. So people's possessions and pets. A lot of shelters aren't going to allow pets, but there are people living outside who have pets who are near and dear to them that they'll stay outside to continue to be with. And so we have to rethink a humane model of shelter that takes on that incorporates these needs. Last one I'll say is I think partnership is really important. If someone can be able to be in shelter with their partner, the likelihood is great that they'll stay there and eventually move along into permanent housing. So we have to realize what those really basic needs are for people who need shelter, and we have great ideas coming out of that design team in terms of how we need to look at shelter moving forward.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your insights today and with our advocates out in the community who are listening to this. And
Mhm.
for all the advocates listening today, I hope that Commissioner Conley's insights and inspire you to take action and connect with your local officials and join us for Homeless Day on the Hill, which is coming up in just a couple of weeks. And so thank you all for listening.
Thank you.